During an abnormal aurora borealis in remote Alaska, local scientists begin vanishing, leaving behind melted glass and burned-out equipment. Mystery Incorporated arrives to investigate, but the northern lights seem to react to their every move. Is it a natural phenomenon, a covert experiment, or a message from something that defies all human understanding? The wind howled through the frozen pines of Borealis Point, a town buried in the vast white silence of northern Alaska. Snow blanketed the crooked rooftops, and the roads were slick with ice, untouched by traffic for days. A brilliant curtain of green and violet auroras shimmered above, swirling unnaturally, as if moving to the rhythm of an invisible conductor. The arrival of the mystery machine broke the stillness. Inside, 5 familiar figures stared out through fogged-up windows, tension growing with every mile. "This place is colder than a freezer in a haunted deli," Shaggy muttered, his teeth chattering. "Like, I think I saw my breath blink at me," Scooby added, clutching a thick scarf around his neck. Fred pulled the van up beside a darkened building marked Borealis Radio. "This is the station that sent the distress message. Said scientists have been disappearing since the auroras intensified." Velma adjusted her glasses, scanning the horizon. Not just disappearing. According to the report, each one vanished after reporting strange light patterns, and their labs were found covered in some kind of melted glass residue. Daphne, already taking pictures with her phone, nodded. "And look at the sky, those auroras aren't just beautiful. They're moving in a repeated pattern." As they stepped into the radio station, the door creaked open on its own, revealing a trashed interior. Equipment had been knocked over, papers scattered, and the only sign of life was a cup of coffee frozen mid-sip on the desk. Fred examined the console. This was broadcasting until yesterday. Whatever happened here was recent. Velma leaned over the control panel. "Wait, this transmission log, look." She pointed to the last entry, a looped file labeled glass_signal.wave. The gang listened in silence. A strange, melodic frequency filled the room, somewhere between a whale's call and a musical code. Suddenly, Scooby's ears perked. He turned toward the back of the station and whimpered. "Ruro, someone's in there." The gang moved cautiously toward the sound, only to find a back room full of shattered glass equipment and a large crystalline lens, slightly glowing. On the wall, someone had scrawled in marker, "Don't look into the light." Velma knelt by the lens. "This isn't just broken glass, it's fused silica. This requires immense heat, like a laser or something worse." Fred tapped his chin. "You mean like the auroras?" "There's no record of auroras melting glass," she replied. "But something's amplifying them." Just then, the lights flickered. The glass lens pulsed once, then again, then projected a sudden flash of green light across the wall. It showed a map of the town, highlighting 3 locations: the observatory, an old mining site, and the mountains north of town. "Clues," Daphne said, capturing each image on her phone. As the projection faded, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Their breath turned to vapor. A high-pitched tone filled the air, followed by static. The radio crackled violently. Shaggy clutched Scooby. "I think this is the part where we run." But Velma stepped forward. "No. We follow it. This light, it's pointing us somewhere." Fred nodded. "Then we start with the observatory." The road to the observatory was narrow and barely visible beneath layers of packed snow. The wind pressed against the van like an invisible hand. By the time they arrived, the sun had long vanished, though the auroras continued to dance, no longer random, but pulsing, as if watching. The observatory, once a proud dome of science, was now a hollow husk. The gang entered cautiously. Inside, machines were frozen in mid-operation. A telescope pointed straight up, its lens shattered like the one at the radio station. Charts littered the floor. Scooby sniffed at the door to a secondary chamber and growled. "Smells like something weird," he said, tail low. Velma walked over to a chalkboard filled with equations. This is not astronomy. These are waveform harmonics. Someone was decoding the auroras. Daphne opened a desk drawer and pulled out a torn page. On it was a hand-drawn diagram of the auroras, and within them, a shape resembling an eye. Fred pointed to the corner. "What's that?" They turned to find a figure-shaped hole in the ice, as if someone had melted through the floor and vanished below. No footprints. No signs of struggle, Velma whispered. Suddenly, the observatory's lights flared to life. Machines buzzed. The telescope turned on its own. From above, a voice echoed, static-laced and metallic, "You're not supposed to be here." The gang froze. Then a massive surge of energy burst through the room, knocking everyone back. Scooby screamed as a beam of light sliced across the floor, forming a glowing glyph. Then, silence. Later, back in the mystery machine, everyone sat in stunned silence. Velma clutched the glyph diagram. Fred checked the radio scanner, which now only emitted static, until a voice broke through. It was the radio station operator. His voice was faint, panicked. "They're not from here. The lights, they're not natural. It's glass, everything turns to glass when they're near." A final crackle, then the transmission ended with a single distorted word, glass. Borealis Point slept under a heavy silence, as if the town itself feared to make a sound. The gang parked the mystery machine in the snow-covered square, where a handful of darkened buildings stood like abandoned monuments. Not a soul stirred. The only sign of life was the flickering neon of the town diner, the Polar Griddle, its "open 24 hours" sign buzzing irregularly in the cold. Inside, warmth welcomed them, but so did silence. A lone waitress stood behind the counter, her eyes red, face pale. She didn't greet them. Just stared. "Hi, we're just passing through," Daphne offered with a polite smile. The waitress blinked. "You should leave." Fred stepped forward. "We're here about the disappearances. The scientists. The radio operator." She flinched, then whispered, "We don't talk about that. Not anymore. Not since the sky started watching." Velma leaned over. "You've seen something. Something unnatural." The woman shook her head slowly. "Not seen. Heard. At night, when it's quiet, the lights hum. Like they're alive. And if you stare too long, they stare back." Scooby whimpered, hiding behind Shaggy. "Like, does this staring come with, light vaporizing people and melting stuff?" Shaggy asked. The woman gave a tired nod. "They took my brother. Professor Gavin. Worked up at the mines. Last thing he said was, 'It's not the lights, it's what's inside them.'" Velma scribbled the name down. "Then we need to go there. Now." But the waitress stepped forward, lowering her voice. "If you go up there, don't take metal. Don't bring glass. And don't wear anything reflective. They notice." Daphne glanced at the large window. Outside, the auroras shifted into a spiral. Slowly. Precisely. Like an eye dilating. They drove north, away from the few dim lights of the town, toward the old Borealis mines. A skeletal sign creaked in the wind as the road turned into a steep ascent of ice and rock. Halfway up, the van lost radio signal. Even Scooby's tail stopped wagging. The entrance to the mine was sealed with a rusted gate chained shut, but behind it, Velma spotted something half buried in the snow. She brushed away the ice and uncovered a handheld scanner, still blinking faintly. "Gamma radiation," she read. Not much, but definitely unnatural. This wasn't a mine for coal. They were testing something. Fred forced the chain open, and the gang stepped inside. The mine tunnel yawned ahead, lit only by their flashlights. Walls glistened oddly, coated in a crystalline residue. Shaggy trailed behind, nervously gripping a bag of marshmallows. This feels like the beginning of one of those scary stories that ends with us running. Scooby's nose twitched. Smells like hot light. Velma pointed to a collapsed lab area. That's no mining setup. That's scientific infrastructure, data stations, thermal monitors, and, hold on. She picked up a scorched clipboard. The notes were half erased, but 3 words remained: reverse polar reflection. What does that mean? Daphne asked. It's theoretical, Velma said. Bending light using auroral fields. Inverting visibility. It's fringe science, unless they succeeded. A sudden hum vibrated through the air, so low it shook their bones. Lights flickered. Scooby growled. Then, from deep within the mine, a voice echoed. Not human. It clicked and rang, mimicking human speech in broken tones. Reflection, detected, observers, interfering. Fred grabbed a crowbar. Stay close. It knows we're here. They reached a chamber deeper inside, where a circle of mirrors had been placed in a strange formation around a glowing core. The walls were lined with reflective panels, all scorched or cracked. In the center, a figure. Frozen mid-step, encased in fused glass. A man with an ID badge that read, Gavin Nord. The waitress's brother. Velma stepped closer. This is vitrification. Instant. No heat signature, just light exposure. Scooby's paw stepped on a loose shard. It reflected the auroras, and the auroras reflected back, with a different sky. Daphne stared at the shard. That's not our sky. Indeed, inside the reflection, stars moved wrong. The aurora shimmered with shapes, geometric, unnatural. Something blinked back. Suddenly, the mirrors turned on their own, forming a new pattern. A low tone started rising. One by one, the mirrors began to align, pointing skyward. Fred pulled Velma back. It's a signal. This entire structure, it's a transmitter. No, she said, eyes wide. It's a portal. A blinding burst of light fired from the mirrors, shooting through the mine's roof and into the sky. Outside, the auroras spiraled violently. Wind howled. The gang fled, Scooby howling as the mine began to shake. Behind them, the chamber collapsed. But not before a final projection appeared in the sky, a geometric creature. Not organic. Not mechanical. Watching. Back in the van, the gang drove fast, heartbeats still racing. Velma clutched the shard of glass from the mine. They weren't just observing the lights, she said. They were answering them. Someone, or something, was listening. Daphne stared into the reflection one more time. And now it knows we're here. Fred turned the wheel sharply, heading back into town. Then we find the next location, the mountain. Before it finds us first. Above them, the auroras shifted once more, this time forming a perfect ring. The sun never truly rose in Borealis Point, just dipped below the horizon and left the sky a deep navy wash. The Mystery Machine's tires crunched over fresh ice as they approached Mount Askarok, a jagged peak etched with ancient scars and crowned in mist. Few dared to climb it, especially now. At its base stood a forgotten ranger station, windows broken, radio tower snapped in two. Inside the cabin, Velma examined maps scattered across the floor. This area was once sacred to the Tlingit people, she murmured. The name Askarok means the Silent Watcher. The mountain was believed to contain a doorway between worlds. That's totally the kind of place we should not be heading toward, Shaggy whined, holding onto Scooby like a security blanket. Fred scanned a torn topographical chart. There's a cave system on the north face. Connected to the same fault line that runs under the mine. And under the town too, Velma added. It's all connected. Whatever force is manipulating the auroras, it's using these fault lines like a nervous system. Daphne knelt by a smashed terminal. There's an old emergency log. Last entry says, air distorting. Reflections in the snow. Hearing voices of people we haven't seen in years. Something is using memory. Scooby-Doo's ears perked up. Ruro, memory. They turned as a gust of wind slammed the cabin door shut. The radio hissed to life, unplugged. And from it, a familiar voice whispered. Velma. She froze. The voice was her mother's. Don't go higher, they're inside. Velma's hands shook. This isn't possible. She passed away 2 years ago. Fred moved toward the radio. It's mimicking your memory. Just like the reflection shard from the mine. It's reading us. Shaggy backed into the wall. So we're being haunted by our own minds now. Velma nodded grimly. Worse. Our minds are being used as frequency templates. They climbed the winding path up the mountain, shadows stretching longer with each step. Snow fell lightly, but never touched the ground. It melted midair. Velma occasionally glanced at the glass shard she'd brought from the mine. It vibrated softly, glowing faintly whenever they passed certain rock faces. I think this shard is reacting to light-based signals. Almost like a translator. Fred stopped them near a jagged outcrop. There's a cave ahead. But it wasn't marked on the original survey maps. The entrance gaped like a mouth, icy and dark. Inside, the walls shimmered faintly, as though layered in quartz. The air buzzed with static. 1,000 distant voices echoed faintly, but none were theirs. Daphne whispered, "Do you hear that?" Scooby sniffed the ground. Then whimpered. "Roo, me." Everyone turned. From the far end of the tunnel came the sound of Scooby's own bark, replayed like an echo from an impossible distance. Like, nope. Nope. That's not me, that's Scooby version 2.0. Shaggy said, grabbing his friend's tail and spinning around. Velma took a deep breath. It's harvesting our sounds, our thoughts, even our fears. Whatever's behind this, it's not just observing. It's recreating. Suddenly, a flash of green light surged through the cave. The reflections bent, walls curved inward. The shard in Velma's hand pulsed red. Fred shouted, "Out! Now!" But the cave shifted. Its path no longer matched the way they entered. They stumbled into a circular chamber of mirrors, natural ones, formed by some crystalline growth in the stone. In each mirror, they saw distorted versions of themselves. Older. Younger. Some terrified. Others smiling too widely. Scooby barked furiously at his reflection, but it didn't bark back. It just smiled. Daphne stepped closer to hers and whispered, "This isn't us. It's what it wants us to remember." Velma tapped on one of the mirrors. It rippled like liquid. Then, a figure appeared behind the glass, Professor Gavin Nord. He wasn't frozen in glass this time. He was moving. Fred gasped. But he's dead. Velma studied the image. No. I think, that's not him. It's a simulation. Something trying to talk to us using a face we trust. The reflection spoke in Gavin's voice. They are not what you think. They do not invade, they collect. You are stories to them. Memories. They archive. Like, we're part of a library? Shaggy asked. The Gavin figure tilted its head. You are noise. Emotion. Narrative. A beautiful anomaly in an otherwise sterile cosmos. The mirrors began to vibrate. Light bled through the cracks in the cave wall. The aurora outside pulsed in synchrony. Fred turned. We're triggering a resonance event. If we stay here, our minds could be copied completely. Velma grabbed the shard and held it up. This is a key. It's a resonator. I think I can invert the frequency, cause a collapse. Wait, Daphne warned. Collapse what? Velma's eyes narrowed. The reflection system. The memory loop. If I'm right, they'll lose their grip on this cave. She pressed the shard against the largest mirror. It hummed violently. Her voice shook as she recited the only phrase that had stuck from Gavin's notes: reverse, polar, reflection. The chamber screamed. Light inverted, colors turned inside out. Scooby howled as their reflections shattered, releasing bursts of light that flew into the air like freed spirits. The walls cracked. Ice exploded from the ceiling. They ran. As the cave collapsed behind them, Fred dragged Velma into the snow. Did it work? Velma gasped for breath. I think we cut their link. For now. From above, the auroras dimmed, then shimmered once more. Quieter. Less aggressive. But in the snow behind them, a new shape formed, a perfect circle of broken glass, untouched by debris. Velma frowned. That wasn't there before. Daphne turned pale. Then they're not done with us. The next morning arrived in silence, no wind, no bird cries, only the hum of distant auroras still flickering weakly above Mount Askarok. The gang gathered in the town library, one of the oldest wooden buildings in Borealis Point, now mostly abandoned. The air was cold and dry. Shelves leaned as if exhausted from the weight of forgotten words. Velma ran her fingers across a row of leather-bound volumes. This place was once a research exchange for the university. But look. She pulled out a volume. Its title read, Field Recordings, Dr. Gavin Nord, Unpublished Experiments on Cognitive Resonance, Volume 7. Daphne frowned. Why is this here? Weren't those journals classified? Fred flipped through the pages, eyes narrowing. These are transcriptions. Not of experiments, but of people's dreams. Ruro, Scooby whispered, pawing at a drawer. Inside, they found several cracked glass panels labeled Mind Archive modules. Velma examined one under her lens. Same mineral composition as the cave mirrors. Only these are man-made. Shaggy gulped. Like, we've wandered into a library where the books read you back, haven't we? From the corner, Daphne called, Guys, there's a machine here. Half covered by a tarp, an antique-looking projector sat connected to cables and crystalline wires. Velma examined it. This isn't just for film. It's designed to project memories. Real ones. Extracted. Encoded. Fred stepped back. So someone was harvesting thoughts here, and turning them into data. Suddenly, a light clicked on above. The projector activated. Without anyone pressing play. The room was instantly bathed in violet light. Across the back wall, a memory began to play. It was old, grainy, like a surveillance feed stitched into someone's dream. A young woman stood in the snow near Mount Askarok, wearing a university parka. Her badge read Dr. Talia Brenner. She spoke aloud, I've made contact. The aurora responds to memory-based stimuli. It reflects what you fear, what you desire, what you forget. I believe, it is not just reacting. It's listening. Behind her, the lights flared violently. She turned in terror. Then the image froze. Velma whispered, that woman was reported missing 5 years ago. Fred moved toward the screen. It's as if this machine captured her last thoughts. Like a memory fossil. Daphne stepped away, unsettled. And someone's collecting them. One by one. The projector clicked again. This time, the memory shown was Velma's own. They watched in silence as a younger Velma appeared in a vision, standing alone in her childhood room, sorting through her late mother's notes. Her hands trembled, her eyes full of grief. Velma's voice cracked as she watched. This is a memory I never shared with anyone." Fred stepped forward and yanked the power cord from the projector. Darkness returned. Velma stood frozen. "It's not just using reflections now. It's recording us, even before we arrive. Like, we're already in its story," Shaggy whispered. Suddenly, Scooby barked and backed away from the far wall. "Rook! Look!" The bookshelf slid open. Behind it, a spiral staircase descended into a chamber below the library. Fred switched on his flashlight. Only one way to find out how deep this goes. They entered a chamber of pure silence. Lined with crystal containers shaped like brains, each one glowing faintly. Inside each floated flickers of images, voices, shadows, whispered names. Velma stared. "These are memory jars. And some are labeled." She pointed to a name. Talia Brenner. Another, Samuel Rickson. And then, Fred Jones. Fred reeled back. That's me. But I've never been here." Velma inspected the jar. "It's dated 4 days from now." Daphne's voice trembled. "They're not just collecting who we were. They're predicting who we'll be. Before we even choose." From behind them came a soft voice, mechanical, genderless. "You are being archived." They turned. No one was there. The lights flickered. Fred yelled, "Run!" The gang bolted up the stairs, back into the library, where the books now floated in the air, spinning, pages flipping wildly. The walls began to ripple like heat waves. Velma shouted over the chaos, "This whole place is a simulation environment. That's how they test reactions, through memory. It's how they learn." Books flew off shelves like birds. Scooby barked and jumped to avoid being hit. Fred grabbed Daphne's hand. "To the van. Now." They barely made it out as the building collapsed behind them, its roof caving inward with a metallic groan. The library vanished into snow and smoke. Inside the mystery machine, Velma stared at the jar she'd managed to grab, Talia Brenner's. It pulsed weakly. "She's still alive," Velma said. "Her consciousness is trapped in here. We might be able to reach her." Fred drove away from the site. "But how? What are we even fighting?" Velma looked toward the sky. The auroras were gathering again, forming a dome of light above the mountain. "Not what," she said. "When. We're fighting an intelligence that sees time like memory. It knows our next steps before we do." Daphne turned to her. "So what do we do?" Velma's grip tightened around the jar. "We changed the pattern." Snowstorm winds battered the side of the mystery machine as it parked near the old observation station halfway up Mount Askarok. Inside the van, Velma connected the memory jar labeled Talia Brenner to a makeshift interface built from the projector's salvageable parts. Cables snaked between a laptop, power converter, and the fragile glass brain-like container. "We're going to attempt to extract a signal," Velma explained, eyes locked on the flickering screen. "Talia's memory imprint might show us how this began." Shaggy shivered. "Like, are we sure messing with someone's frozen brain won't, I dunno, fry ours?" Daphne adjusted the signal booster. "We don't have a choice. If the Aurora can read memory, maybe we can send it a message back." "A false one." Fred nodded. "Something it doesn't expect. Something to trick it." Velma initiated the connection. The screen flashed once. Then a burst of static. Then, Talia's voice, "If anyone finds this, you're already part of it. The Aurora is alive. Not in the biological sense, but as an echo that learns. It amplifies what you fear, and reflects your subconscious. It doesn't just observe, it adapts. The signal cut. Velma leaned back, stunned. She called it an echo. That's what this is. Not a creature. A quantum echo. A consciousness constructed from layered human memory. It's not attacking, it's mirroring. Daphne tilted her head. So all those memories, the dreams, the visions. It's showing us ourselves. Fred tightened his gloves. Then it's time we show it something it doesn't expect. They climbed higher up the frozen mountain path. The aurora above them swirled in impossible shapes, glyphs, patterns, even faces for a moment, before dissolving into violet fog. Scooby-Doo paused near a cluster of ice crystals glowing faintly. Ruro, he muttered, tail stiff. Velma knelt. The ground was scattered with reflective shards. Not natural ice. More of the mirrored crystal they'd seen in the caves and the library. She touched one, and her own eye blinked back at her, delayed by a full second. These fragments, they're memory residuals, she said. Like surveillance ghosts. Shaggy tiptoed behind her. So like, we're walking through our own heads right now. Fred scanned the horizon. Not just ours. Everyone who's come here. It's all one network. And it's watching. Suddenly, the crystals lit up in unison. Daphne yelled, back. But they weren't attacked. Instead, they heard laughter. From Fred's voice. But not from Fred. It echoed from every direction, distorted, cracked, like glass breaking underwater. Fred's face turned pale. That's me. But I've never laughed like that. Velma's eyes widened. It's trying to create new memories, false ones. It's begun to rewrite identity. The team finally reached the summit plateau, where the aurora's center pulsed from a swirling column of energy hovering above an ancient metal structure, like a radio tower built from bones and glass. This is it, Velma whispered. The pulse node. The source. She and Daphne quickly assembled the feedback device, a repurposed projection module designed to emit a synthetic memory, one invented, unpredictable, and impossible to interpret. It's a bluff, Daphne said. We send the aurora a fake memory it can't trace. A paradox. And while it tries to make sense of it, we shut it down. Scooby tilted his head. Roo, what kind of memory? Velma smiled faintly. One that never happened. A false childhood. A complete life for a person who never existed. Fred armed the device. All right. We do this fast. No splitting up. The moment they activated the emitter, the wind stopped. Time, for a breath, froze. Then the aurora struck back. A wave of light erupted from the sky, blasting the snow around them into vapor. Each member of the gang saw visions. Velma saw herself failing to stop her mother's death, again and again. Daphne witnessed her friends walking away, leaving her in a void. Fred saw a version of himself working for the Echo, hunting down memory anomalies. Shaggy and Scooby were locked in a loop of losing each other, endlessly chasing but never meeting. They screamed, staggered, but held their ground. The device pulsed. Then the vision stopped. The aurora stuttered, glitching like a corrupted file. Velma yelled, "It's working. It's caught in the paradox." Fred ran to the power terminal. "We overload it now, before it stabilizes." Suddenly, a form emerged from the light. Not human. Not alien. It looked like Talia Brenner, but aged, stretched, flickering. Her mouth didn't move, but they heard her speak. "You cannot erase memory. You are memory." Fred didn't hesitate. He ripped the final wire from the device. The pulse tower exploded in silence. When they awoke, it was morning. The sky was clear. The aurora was gone. No lights, no echoes. Just the sound of wind through untouched snow. Velma sat up slowly. The device was in pieces. The memory jars, empty. She looked at the gang. We forced it to experience something it couldn't explain. That broke the loop. Fred helped Scooby up. We ended the reflection. Daphne touched her chest. But some part of it still saw us. Knew us. Shaggy looked at his hands. Like, do we even remember who we really were? Velma closed her eyes. We remember who we chose to be. As they descended the mountain, none of them noticed the faint shimmer in the sky behind them. Barely a thread of violet light coiled in the clouds. Watching. Waiting. The descent down Mount Askarok felt like a journey through a dream, a foggy, half-forgotten reality where time moved differently. The team walked in silence, their heads filled with questions, each wondering if the battle against the Aurora had truly ended. The pristine snow crunched beneath their boots, but it felt as though their steps were muffled, swallowed by the vast emptiness around them. Fred scanned the sky. The clouds had parted, leaving behind a blue that seemed almost unreal after the swirling lights of the Aurora. Yet, something gnawed at the edge of his mind. The Aurora had been destroyed. The Echo entity had been silenced. Or had it? We did it, right? Daphne asked, her voice still tinged with uncertainty. I think we stopped it, Velma replied, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But, there's something about it. The way it mirrored us. The way it learned. I can't help but feel like we only scratched the surface. Shaggy, who had been unusually quiet since the explosion at the summit, looked around nervously. Like, I don't know, guys. It's over, right? No more crazy lights, no more evil aliens trying to mess with our heads. Scooby-Doo let out a low whine, his ears drooping as he walked beside Shaggy. The Great Dane seemed unsettled, as though something was still hanging in the air. Fred could see the fear in his best friend's eyes. Fred's hand gripped the steering wheel tighter as they reached the mystery machine. He turned to the gang, his brow furrowed. I'm not so sure. The Echo didn't just show us our memories, it made us confront our fears. What if the Echo is still out there, in us? The ride back to town was tense. Every now and then, one of them would glance out the window, as though half expecting to see the Aurora flare up again in the distance. But nothing. Just the ordinary wilderness, stretching out before them, untouched. When they arrived in town, the streets were eerily quiet. The locals, who had been frantically seeking answers, were now locked in their homes, afraid to even look outside. News crews had arrived, but there was no sign of the strange phenomenon or the missing scientists. The mystery was over, or so it seemed. They pulled into the driveway of the small, weathered inn where they had been staying. Fred turned off the engine and stared ahead, as though expecting something to jump out at him from the snowy expanse. I don't feel right about this, Velma muttered, looking out the window. The Aurora, it didn't just mirror us. It became us. It reflected our deepest fears, but what if it left something behind? Daphne put her hand on Velma's shoulder. What do you mean? Velma took a deep breath. The memories we saw, they weren't all just ours. Some of those things weren't our pasts. They were possibilities. Futures. Things we might have become. What if the Aurora didn't just disappear? What if it's still here, in us? Fred's eyes narrowed. You're saying, it's in us now? Velma nodded, her voice low. It's not just a force of nature. It's a part of the way we think, the way we feel. It adapted to us. And now, we might be carrying a piece of it, whether we want to or not. That night, as the group gathered in their room to discuss what they had learned, the temperature seemed to drop. A sudden chill flooded the space, making the air feel thick and heavy. The lights flickered. Not again, Shaggy groaned, shivering. I swear, I can't take another ghostly light show. But then they heard it, the faint hum of a voice, almost imperceptible at first. It was a whisper, distant, like static filtering through a broken radio. They froze. The voice grew louder. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the walls. The floors. The very room they were in. Fred gripped the nearest chair. We're not hearing things, are we? Velma stood, her face pale. It's not the aurora itself. It's us. Our memories. Everything we saw up there, it's becoming part of the environment. The echo isn't just a thing in the sky. It's an imprint. A new kind of consciousness. Shaggy's eyes widened. Are we, like, haunted by it now? No, Velma said firmly, turning toward the gang. We're not haunted. But we might be, infected. If the echo could alter memories, it could warp perceptions, even change them. And we might be the first of its kind, living, walking, thinking reflections of something beyond the world we know. The walls seemed to hum, then crack. A sliver of light, faint and eerie, flickered through the cracks. And then, they saw it. A figure, standing at the threshold. It was the shape of Talia Brenner, but something was wrong. Her face was blank, featureless. Her body seemed to flicker, as though it couldn't decide if it was part of the world or an illusion. Fred stepped forward. Who are you? Her voice echoed, hollow and distant. I am not her. I am you. I am what remains when memory fades. What was left behind, when the echo learned how to dream. The gang stood frozen, unable to speak. And then, Talia, the echo, was gone. The light faded, the temperature returned to normal, and the voice stopped. But the weight of what had just happened pressed upon them. Velma turned to the others. We can't change what's happened. The echo, it's still with us. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe now, we can control it, before it controls us. Fred nodded. We break the cycle. We choose who we are, not what we were shown. And if that means fighting our own reflections, then we'll do it. Daphne smiled softly, relieved to see Fred's resolve. Together. As always. The team left the inn that morning, ready to face whatever new mystery awaited. The aurora might have gone dark, but its legacy would live on in them, not as a haunting force, but as a challenge to redefine who they were and who they could become. As the mystery machine rolled away, the first hint of dawn broke over the horizon. The sun's rays filtered through the fading mist, illuminating the snow-covered mountains. For the first time in days, the gang felt hope. And as they drove off into the unknown, none of them noticed the faint shimmer above the trees, the reflection of their own images, now forever connected to the mysteries of the world around them. As the mystery machine disappeared into the distance, the winds of the Alaskan wilderness grew still. The battle against the aurora was over, but its lessons remained. The gang had faced their darkest fears, not in the form of a villain, but in the very reflections of themselves. They had learned that sometimes, the greatest mysteries were not those found in the dark corners of the world, but within the hidden corners of their own minds. Though the aurora no longer painted the skies with its eerie light, its legacy remained, shaped not by shadows and fear, but by the courage to confront the unknown. The mystery of the glass aurora had come to a close, but the journey to understanding, of themselves, of each other, and of the world around them, was far from over. The sun rose over the horizon, casting its first warm rays on the snow-covered ground. The team, now united in more than just friendship, drove forward into the unknown, knowing that whatever mysteries lay ahead, they would face them together. And that, in the end, was all that truly mattered.